were for about a
Yeah.
minute.
Okay. Interesting. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Everyone out there on YouTube land and those that are going to see this. We are the Wakened by Yahuwah Assembly, Yahuwah Almighty, Yahushua Messiah, and we are going to be doing our normal Sabbath day readings. So let me just get rid of this background noise you're probably going to hear in a second. Um, we're going to be doing 2 Samuel 12 to 14. Let me just get my scriptures up on the screen here. We'll get going. So let's see. 2 Samuel. Okay, so all right, so 2 Samuel 12 to 14. Okay. Huh. Okay, there's a couple that I'm gonna have to re-download. I see here. I don't have all my modules here for some reason. Okay. Let's see here. So let's do compare. All right, so what we can at least do is do we'll do Brenton's for the Septuagint, ESV for the Masoretic, and let's see, I think that's it for now. Oh no, we got the Vulgate here as well. Okay, so we'll do a three-way parallel here. 2 Samuel, chapter 12. Uh, Mom, can you start us off? I just need to do a short intermission.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Yahuwah sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drink from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, as surely as Yahuwah lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. This is what Yahuwah, the Almighty of Yashrael, says. I anointed you king over Yashrael, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Yashrael and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of Yahuwah by doing what was evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Amorites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what Yahuwah says. Out of your own household, I am going to bring calamity upon you. Before your very eyes, I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will be with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against Yahuwah. Nathan replied, Yahuwah has taken away your sin. You are not going to die, but because by doing this, you have made the enemies of Yahuwah show other contempt. The son born to you will die. After Nathan had gone home, Yahuwah struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with Yahuwah for the child. He fasted and wept into his house and spent the night lying on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. On the seventh day, the child died. David's servants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, but they thought, while the child was still living, we spoke to David, but he would not listen to us. How can we tell him the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his servants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied. He is dead. Then David got up from the ground after he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of Yahuwah and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate. His servants asked him, Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. He answered, While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, Who knows? Yahuwah may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and lay with her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. Yahuwah loved him, and because Yahuwah loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. Meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal citadel. Joab then sent messengers to David, saying, I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise, I will take the city and it will be named after me. So David mustered the entire army, went to Rabbah, and attacked and captured it. He took the crown from the head of their king. Its weight was a talent of gold, and it was set with precious stones, and it was placed on David's head. He took a great quantity of plunder from the city and brought out the people who were there, consigning them to labor with saws and with iron picks and axes, and he made them work at brickmaking. He did this to all the Ammonite towns. Then David and his entire army returned to Jerusalem. A couple couple of interesting things I'm noticing here. I got a couple of footnotes. The first thing is the name that Yahuwah gave to Solomon being Yedidiah. And my footnote says the name means loved by Yahuwah. And one other thing I noticed was the crown that he got from the Ammonite king, which he, the crown that he besieged, that he took. The crown was 75 pounds. So his crown that he wore was 75 pounds. That's quite a heavy crown. So those were two things that I noticed. Hmm.
Jedediah. Interesting name. And they changed the Y to a J. We get Jedediah.
Yeah. Oh.
We're unmuted.
What?
We're unmuted. I was just making a comment about the word, the name Jedediah.
Oh,
When they
okay.
change the Y to a J, that's where we get Jedediah.
Yeah, we got a Jedediah in the fellowship in Missouri.
Wow. So they would not have called him Solomon. They would have called him Yedidiah then.
Yeah.
Oh my
Or slow mo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, our Jedediah in the fellowship is a real young fella. I think he's either in his late teens or early 20s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No.
We've got a lot of young people there.
That's nice.
I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest person in the whole fellowship.
I heard something happened there at the New Madrid fault line. I didn't read about it, but something on YouTube came up. And something came out of the fault line.
So what you're saying, Mom, is they called Solomon a different name?
Yedidiah.
Huh.
Yeah, Yahuwah said to through the prophet Nathan to call him Yedidiah. Which my footnote says Yahuwah Give me 1 second.
Was Solomon be born yet, though? I
Um,
don't think he would have been born yet.
he was conceived. It says that night, Yahuwah, I'm sorry, that night, Bathsheba lay with David, that night after Nathan, and lay with him, and she gave birth to a son. So it's referencing after she gave birth to the son. And then Yahuwah said to name him Jedediah, meaning loved by Yahuwah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found that interesting too.
Yeah.
Because most of us really refer to him as Solomon. You know what I mean? Like, this is the only place
yeah. That's because the Bible itself
That's right. That's right.
always calls him that.
That's right.
Like, you only see that name used once.
Right. That's right.
So that's more of like a title, Mom. That would be like how Yahusha is called Emmanuel, and every other time he's called Yahusha.
I see.
It's
Yes,
kind of
that
the
makes a
same
lot
thing.
of sense. Okay,
It's
got
like
it.
a prophetic
Mhm,
title. It's
mhm,
like a title that describes who he is to Yahuwah.
mhm. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of the same thing. Just like how Israel only a handful of times is called Jezreel, but
Mhm.
everywhere else they're called Israel. It's not a name.
Right.
It's a
Right.
title. It's a title. It's a prophetic type of title. So a lot of the times Yahuwah will do that. He'll give certain people titles that are not exactly their name.
Mhm.
So that's what I would say that really is going on there. I doubt that's actually his birth. That's more of a indicating who Solomon would become. He would become someone loved by
Mhm.
Yahuwah, kind of like how John, his name means beloved. It's kind of the same thing.
Mhm.
And yeah. Interesting. See, this is one of the things I do like about the ESV translation. They give you a lot of footnotes.
Mhm.
Seeing here for the 2011 edition here. Let me see if I can kind of maximize the screen here. You can see here they give you all these cross references. Some of them we haven't even got to yet. 2 Samuel 14:5. 1 Kings 1:8, 2 Chronicles 29:25, Psalms 51 verse 1. So for 2 Samuel 12:1, you have all those cross references. So that's really good that they include that. So basically, this is self-explanatory, right? This was the chapter about the adultery and what was going to happen from it. David was going to lose his first child as punishment.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is a really good chapter for a lot of people that struggle with topics like this, like especially when you're talking to an atheist. Don't get tripped up when an atheist says, "Well, if your God is so good, why does he allow death to happen and this and that?" This is a perfect example of that. Death is a punishment and a necessity for sin. So what you have to understand is that when sin happens, death is required.
That's exactly right.
And so, does Yahuwah want to have to kill an innocent baby? No.
No.
Is it necessary? Yes.
Yes.
That's the distinction. So I see this all the time with the Gnostics. They try to turn Yahuwah into this like evil demiurge character, and they try to flip it back like at us like, oh well, you see how evil he is, he's doing this and that. It's because they don't know him. They don't know Yahuwah. They don't understand the scripture in context. And they're taking a human secular understanding of the Bible. So what they're doing is they're looking at all these instances where Yahuwah had to do something as punishment, they're flipping it on its head, saying, "Oh well, no, he's just evil and maniacal." No, Yahuwah is righteous and he's loving, but he also is a righteous Elohim, which means that if sin happens, death is required. That's what happened in the fall. Sin equals death.
That's right.
So by default, if someone sins, death is required the majority of the time. So Yahuwah either would have required David's life in this situation,
Right.
or the life of his son. Those were the two options. And Yahuwah spared David's life, but there had to be death required. Sin happened.
That's
So
To be a punishment.
Yeah. So when an atheist says stuff, this is why I bring this up, guys. When an atheist says stuff like this and they bring up these cases, we gotta be able to defend ourselves and contend for the faith and be like, listen, no, he's not being evil here. Yahuwah has to do what he has to do because of the payment of sin. Sin causes a payment of death. Most people don't understand that because only Yahuwah's spirit can really lead you into understanding this stuff. You can't understand the Bible on a mere human understanding the majority of the time. The majority of the time, it is if you're using a academic philosophical understanding, you're not going to understand the Bible. And many people have tried. That's why you have Gnostics today that believe what they believe, because the Gnostics themselves originally supposedly became Gnostics because they didn't understand Yahuwah's character. They didn't understand how Yahuwah could have wrath and be loving at the same time. So what happened, Mom, was a lot of these religions had a dualistic God, good and evil together. Most of these pagan religions had dualism. When the Gnostics came about, because they couldn't understand how Yahuwah could have wrath and be righteous and be loving and at the same time, all at the same time, they decided, oh, he's just evil. You see what I'm saying? Because they didn't have spirit in them. They couldn't understand it. They chose the easy option. Oh, he's evil. He's this demiurge. And so that's how the world looks at Yahuwah. The world, whether you realize it or not, if an atheist is watching right now, you're being led by a satanic spirit. That's why you're an atheist. The devil is whispering in your ear, oh, that guy, creator God's evil. Why would you want to believe in him? That is a spirit of the devil telling you that. And that's what people need to understand. So all you agnostics out there, all you atheists out there, that's the reality of the situation. That's the reality. Gnosticism is a evil satanic religion that has flipped the Bible upside down, used other texts to try to pervert the understanding of the Bible. And so when people, usually atheists will bring stuff up like this. They'll bring up stuff like this, or times where Yahuwah required, even to a certain extent, I know this sounds crazy, but Yahuwah is even required to appease his wrath, the death of wicked people, almost like a sacrifice. Like Gideon, what he did was almost like a sacrifice. He killed an Israelite man for committing fornication with a pagan woman. And Yahuwah's wrath went away once the guy was dead. So atheists will twist that account. They'll say, oh, see, human sacrifice, yada, yada, yada. We have to be able to have the right understanding to combat these atheists and these Gnostics. We have to have the right understanding to understand, yes, a human being killed that was being wicked, that was sinning, that was causing Yahuwah's people to sin, by the way, a stumbling block, okay, essentially is what that is, okay? So they had a stumbling block in their midst and was being taken out, killed. That is righteous in Yahuwah's eyes. Why? Because you take away the stumbling block. Okay, so this is what we need to understand. The original understanding of take the evil out of our midst didn't just mean excommunicating. In the Tanakh, it meant killing that person.
That's right.
That's the reality. So The reality is, like, we're taught, oh, that's evil. It's not evil. You're removing evil out of your midst.
That's
How's that
right.
evil?
That's right.
So we're taught in this hippie society that killing's bad, this and that, this and that, you know, and that's partly the reason why, you know, in my personal opinion, you got sorcery rampant in this country. You got witchcraft rampant in this country. You got, you know, Wiccans and New Agers rampant in this country. And that's due to basically not, you know, putting the evil away from your midst. So because we can't establish Yahuwah's government in this land, because quite frankly, a lot of the Torah about government has to do with the land of Israel only. You see what happens in a land that's not governed by Torah. It's just chaos. It's straight chaos. It's evil everywhere. So the next time someone says to you, oh, you know, how can you serve Elohim like that? You know, you can always flip it around, tell them, listen, if there wasn't this in the word, and Israel would have fell away a lot quicker than they did. And the reason you got the problems you have in this country is because you think you have the wrong ideology and think that killing a wicked person is evil, and would rather let a wicked person live to spread wickedness. So you're the actual issue. Yahuwah is not the issue. It's that our ideologies are not congruent with his word. That's the reality. And that's why you'll see atheists constantly, you know, getting the better of Christians because they don't know how to defend the Bible. They don't know how to defend the Bible, and they're not being honest with themselves about what the Bible teaches. Because the Bible does not teach equality. It does not teach men and women are equal. It does not teach that it's evil to kill. Christians are not taught the difference between murder and killing. And, you know, and the difference between genocide and killing. Okay. And there's so many different topics that we're not educated on. So that's why we look like crazy people to these atheists when atheists are actually bringing up facts in the Bible that that we should not be denying. Yes, Yahuwah had to cause the death of a baby because of sin. He had to. It's not that he wanted to, it's that that's required in the law, in scripture. When sin happens, death has to happen. Whether it's either it's the father that's dying or the son that's dying. And you can even find that in scripture. A lot of us have rejected the biblical belief even of generational curses. Even no one wants to admit that there's generational curses. Tons of Christians out there, especially the Baptists, want to reject the idea of generational curses, not even realizing that it's all throughout the Bible.
Sure.
You literally have Exodus chapter 20 saying, I will visit the sins of the father to the son, meaning that the sin of the father goes to the son. So literally there's generational curses in the Bible. It's not something that's made up. So when you have that issue going on, it makes sense why you have innocent children dying because of the sins of their parents.
That's right. That's right.
That's the only way to understand that. Without that context, you know, you're gonna have a problem reconciling with, you know, with parts of Yahuwah's character, because you're gonna be like, why is he doing this? Why is innocent children, you know, being casualties? Unless you understand these concepts, unless you understand also that death is required when sin happens, unless you understand about generational curses, unless you understand about all these things, your faith is gonna be shaken in Yahuwah a little bit.
And when you think about it, he could have killed David.
Yeah.
Actually, he should have killed David, but because David was called and David was repentant, he chose to kill the baby instead.
David did a lot of great work for you.
Yeah, David ended up being a man after Yahweh's own heart.
That's
Scripture.
Yep. Yep. And like you said, sis, it was because of his purpose for
Right.
David. That's really the only reason.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So atheists will bring that up too. They'll say,
Oh, yeah.
why didn't he take the life of David since David's the one that sinned? And they'll try to flip that around, not understanding the concept of Yahuwah's greater will and purpose. And again, this is why, like, Yahuwah veils understanding of his word from the world, and he gives understanding to people that are actually in relationship with him. Because those that are in relationship with him, he gives them his spirit. The only way to understand his words to have his spirit in them. So this is why, like when people try to bring up stuff, you got to take it with a grain of salt when an atheist is trying to tell you what the Bible says. Because the atheist or agnostic or whatever they are, they don't have the spirit in them. So they don't have they're not going to be able to have a full understanding of what Yahuwah's word says because they're being led by another spirit. So that's another thing a lot of people don't understand. So they all these Gnostics think they know what the Bible says when they really don't. They're going on their human reasoning and understanding, and even the forefathers. That's the reason they rejected some of the Bible, like these Freemasonic forefathers of America. They would reject anything that's supernatural, anything that's beyond reasoning. So when you're of a philosophical background, you're not going to be able to understand the Bible. The Bible goes against Greek philosophy. It goes against human reasoning. A lot of the Bible does. So anyway,
I've even seen people, I've been on YouTube where they commented, why wasn't David and Bathsheba killed according to the Torah? Because they're right. In the Torah, that is what is normally done to a normal people. But David was very, very, as you say, man after Yahuwah's own heart, and Yahuwah had big plans for him.
yeah,
He had big prophecy for him to be the line of Messiah. And that was a big reason why it was not his will to kill him, or Bathsheba for that matter. Bathsheba kind of got off the hook too.
yeah.
I mean, interesting topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of Torah actually in this chapter that you gloss over, you don't really pay attention to. David's even saying the one that took the land, he should have to pay for back. That goes back to the law of restoration. Basically, when a fellow Israelite would steal from a fellow Israelite and sin, they are required to pay it back 4 times the amount. So you pay back what you stole, and then you pay back another like 4-fold basically. And that goes back to Leviticus 6:5. I'm actually impressed with the ESV here. They have a lot of footnotes here. Actually right under the scripture, rather than under the page, they put it right under the verse. So yeah. So 2 Samuel 12:1, 1 Kings 14:7.
Drop out.
I don't know what.
I'm just kind of looking at some of these references here. So the sword shall never depart. Now here's this is almost like a prophecy here, a warning, a punishment and a prophecy here. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me and you have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Now what does this actually mean? The sword shall not depart from his house. it's really allegorical in a way
Mhm.
because it's talking about that from here on, David's going to constantly be at war.
Okay.
And if you think about it, his house, who's of his house? His son.
Mhm.
It is a foreshadowing to the punishment that his son will constantly be at war with him. Because think about it, Hebraically, what a house is: husband, wife, children.
Mhm.
He's not talking about a bricks and mortar. He's talking about your house,
Mhm.
your generation, your genealogy, your house.
Mhm.
The sword will never depart. Meaning, you're, and we see this with who was it? Asa or Asaph? Which was one of? No, I'm thinking of not. I'm thinking of the wrong person here. Who was the one mom? Who was the son that constantly tried to kill him?
Absalom.
Absolutely.
Absalom. I believe that's a foreshadowing to Absalom. The sword shall never
Mhm.
depart from your
Yeah.
house. You know,
And
house.
when you think about what happened not so long ago in World War II with Hitler killing all those Jewish people, um, these
Yeah.
are these are descendants of Peretz,
Yeah.
and
The funny thing is that
so
the
was David.
majority, yeah, they're all Ashkenazis, so I don't know about that. If I can really tie that to David, because the thing is, there's been studies done. The majority of them don't have Judean blood in them. The
Oh,
majority of
really?
those, yeah, they're actually Khazars. Yeah, they what happened, sis, was in history in 1948, they moved these European Russians into that land, and supposedly the real reason that Hitler and all that happened was Hitler was like a hired gun, and these Zionists, these Edomite Zionists, wanted to get their own people into that land. So what really happened was you had Edomites sacrificing their own people, is actually what happened in reality. So I see where the confusion comes from because we're taught that they're Judeans, but in reality, you can go back to Genesis 10. All over the Bible, it shows Ashkenaz is not a Shemite. Ashkenaz comes from Japheth. They're all Japhethites. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if there's intermarriage going on at some point, they could possibly have a very small percentage of Yahudim blood, but they're definitely not. They're definitely not purely from David's line.
I know there
Yeah,
are some that are over
yeah,
there. I've
yeah,
met, and
yeah.
anyway,
There was like a Harvard study that like 10% or 20% only of the people over there are of that bloodline, and that the majority is Ashkenaz, Khazars, the Khazars, and what's the other ones they're from? Yeah, Walter Vaith did a very good video about that, how their own leadership has admitted this in a book. It's called Facts Are Facts, and it's by a Jewish guy, Jewish scholar, wrote it and talked, and he admitted that the majority of the people that you see in that land today are not Shemites. They are Khazars. They are Russian Khazars that were pretty much migrated and converted to Judaism. Basically, that's the difference. So when we see the word Jew, we get the wrong connotation. Jew is actually a religious connotation. The Yahusha would have been considered a Yahudim, or in modern English, Judean of Judea. He was not a Jew. Jews, that term
Right.
Jew did not come about until, like, it's just a little history lesson here, not until about 1700s almost. That word wasn't even a thing until like the 1700s. And basically, a Jew can be anyone that's in the religion of Judaism. You could be a quote unquote goyim Gentile, Italian like me or my mother born, and if we converted to Judaism, we would be a quote unquote Jew.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's
I
the
have
difference.
known that most of the people I know that live in Jerusalem are Messianic.
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
are true Jews that
Yeah.
decided to follow Messiah.
Yeah.
The Khazars probably aren't that many that follow Messiah. I don't know.
No. They're the leadership. They're the majority of the population, though, and they're the leadership. So they would be the Sanhedrin, would be the Khazars. The Khazars would have been who founded that Zionistic nation of Israel. The Zionists are part Khazarian. The Khazars are basically part Edomite and all that, because Edom and Japheth kind of intermarried at a certain point. So you had like the Khazar mafia and the Ashkenaz, the people of Ashkenaz that descend from Ashkenaz, who's of Japheth. All of them were kind of intertwined together marriage wise, and like all those guys like Miriam Shalbauer and all them, they're all Khazarian. The I would say the people you know are a very small percentage of the population of that country right now. The people
Right.
that you like, that's what I mean by Harvard studies have been done that 80-90% of the population that's over there are Khazarian. So, and if I can, I'm going to find you the link for Walter Vave's video about it. But he even cited the book Facts Are Facts. A Jewish guy wrote it, admits that the majority of people in that land today are Khazarians and Ashkenazi and not Yahudim. So I personally cannot prove that would refer to World War II, since the majority of those people were from that lineage, that were in those gas chambers and all that. It's still not right. I'm not saying it was right what Hitler did.
No, it's still innocent blood.
It's still innocent blood, but the people he killed was actually his own people.
Right.
And actually he himself was Ashkenazi. People are come to find out. So it seems like he was a hired gun is really what happened. The whole hating Jews thing, that was a front. That was a whole front. What they really wanted to do was create a Zionistic Edomite Israel. And the easiest way to do that, you get sympathy from other nations. You basically sacrifice your own Edomite people, and then that happens. But yeah, there's been many people researching into this. Many people have found out that the majority of that out there, of those people out there, and I'm not saying they're evil because they're Edomite born. I'm just saying this is, the reality of their DNA. Like, that's the reality of the majority of the people over there are not real Yahudim. And so there's that going on. So, but I would say, like, the sword never departing from Dawood's house possibly lasted until, I would say, maybe the time of Solomon, possibly. Because we do see that kind of stopping when Solomon takes over as king. He's not really in war a lot.
Right.
You kind of see, Yahuwah even says, like, when I see that meaning of his literal house, like, meaning of his genealogy. The sword will never depart. So once I think Dawood died, that whole prophecy probably was fulfilled and it was done, because Solomon really wasn't in war a lot. And Yahuwah even said to Solomon, I'm choosing you to build my temple, right? Because
you're not going to be a war.
Because your dad was constantly at war with people. And I don't want someone who's shed blood to build my house.
Right.
But this is the video here that I'm talking about. So I'll put in the link for anyone that's interested. But Walter Vaith, this 7-day Adventist guy, he goes into the whole history of the Khazarians and all that. And the difference between the term Jew and Judean, it's not the same thing. So a lot of people get confused with that too, because they think that it's an ethnic connotation when it's not. So,
and I think there's probably more actually Jewish people descended from that line here in America than there are in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right.
I would say a lot more, to tell you the truth. A real Yahudim that possibly could be over here. I would agree with you that there's a lot more here in other places. I think there's a lot in Africa, in my opinion. There seems to be proof from Ak named Truth Unedited that a lot of them went to Africa after 70 AD. So it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting video he does about that, and a series he does about that. But anyway, I do think though that prophecy of the sword never departing from his house, I do think like Yahuwah like literally meant his house. Like so his whole line of his his line of his immediate family. So from him on to, I guess it would stop at the time of Solomon becoming king. So it constantly though you see David at war, and his own son wants to kill him. His own son, Absalom, wants to kill him. So that prophecy by Nathan definitely was being fulfilled at the minimum, with that. But Solomon, I think he didn't deal with much war, did he? Was there any wars that he had?
I don't think so.
Like he was at peace. It was almost like a foreshadowing to a messianic age when Solomon was being righteous. It was like I think Yahuwah was trying to use him initially as a type of Yahusha, because you see him riding on a donkey when he gets anointed.
That's right.
You see all these little foreshadowings, and it's kind of like if Solomon never turned away, I think that Israel would have had a real taste of the millennial reign in a temporal aspect. During the lifetime of Solomon, it would have been a foreshadowing to the millennium. Unfortunately, that didn't happen though, and the kingdom got split. It was given to Jeroboam, Rehoboam.
And that's when war began again.
Oh, that's when it was horrible. Yeah, there was constant war. There was constant war when his kingdom was given, because Rehoboam and Jeroboam butted heads.
Yes.
I think it was Rehoboam. I forget which one. I think Jeroboam was the more wicked one.
Yeah.
He was the one that took the sin of Aaron to a whole nother level. He made 2 golden calves. He caused Israel to sacrifice on high places versus the temple. He was telling them you don't have to go to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices. So Jeroboam did a lot of damage.
It was very bad.
So, but yeah, just to explain that. But yeah, there's a lot of actual Torah stuff in this chapter. It goes through a lot of stuff here. But what's interesting too is that there seems to be judgment on his wives as well, because it says, "Behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house." Here's the Absalom thing. Out of your own house, meaning out of your own, genealogy. And I will take your wives before your eyes, give them to your brother or your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this son. I don't know. That's a weird way to phrase it. Okay. So I guess this is referring to Absalom hating him. And then I guess didn't his one wife, the daughter of Saul, marry someone else for a time?
Daughter of Saul.
Mikhail.
Mikhail.
Yeah, so that could have been the fulfillment of that. It says, I'm going to give your wife to your neighbor.
Oh, okay.
Because if you think about it, the guy that she was given to marry while she was still married to David was like a fellow Israelite. So that actually works for that. But there's cross references here too for anyone interested. You got 2 Samuel 16:11, 2 Samuel 16:22, and Job 13:10. Shabbat shalom.
Isn't that considered adultery? The fact that Saul gave out of spite Milcah, David's wife, to another man? Why would she marry another man? That's considered adultery, right?
Yeah, I think Yahuwah caused that as the punishment here. To answer your question, I think even though it was a sin, you're right. Yahuwah caused that to happen as a punishment for David committing adultery. It's almost like a what is it called? What is that phrase in scripture? A arm for arm, tooth for tooth, type of thing. So this is
part but he didn't commit adultery yet with Bathsheba.
Well, in this chapter he does. In this chapter, he does. So this maybe it's not talking about Mikael here, but it does say that Yahuwah is going to give his wife to another. So basically, Yahuwah is going to cause one of David's wives to commit adultery as punishment. Because this is the chapter where he commits adultery with Bathsheba, and Yahuwah is giving him all this judgment, saying, "Listen, now the sword's not going to depart from your house. I'm going to cause those of your own household to turn against you. I'm going to give your wives to someone else, to be married to someone else." So you have like constant judgment on him. Similar actual punishments actually to those that would break the covenant in general. When Israel broke the covenant with Yahuwah in Deuteronomy 28 said, "I'm going to give your wives to another. I'm going to give your children to another." And he goes on and on and on about the curses. So it's kind of similar to the curses of Deuteronomy 28, from what I'm seeing here. Yeah, we're in 2 Samuel 12. What verse was that, Mom, where he gives him like all these punishments here, all these curses here?
Yeah, we just read it a little.
Verse 11. So it starts at, "I will raise up evil against you of your own house," meaning of your own family. There's going to be evil against you.
Mm-hmm.
"I will take your wives from your eyes and give them to your neighbor," meaning your brother, your fellow Israelite.
Mm-hmm.
"And he shall lie with your wives in sight of this sun." I don't know why it says sun. It's just weird wording, but I guess it means in daylight, maybe. I don't know. It's probably an allegory. So 2 Samuel 12:11 says that's the judgment pronounced against David. So maybe I'm wrong. Like Sister Marissa was saying, maybe it's not Mikael. Maybe it's another wives Yahuwah is talking about.
Could have been
Later wives that he had. I mean, we know David also had concubines too, so it could be talking about them as well. "For you did it secretly." It's talking about what David did with Bathsheba. "But I will do this thing before all Yasharal and before the sun." So before the sun would mean in broad daylight. Like it's gonna be a public display before you.
Yeah.
He
was mad.
David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against Yahuwah." And Nathan said to David, "Yahuwah also has put away your sin. You shall not die." So this is mercy here.
Mm-hmm.
And here's all the cross references you can see here. Genesis 39:9, Numbers 22:34, Joshua 7:20, 2 Samuel 12:1, 1 Chronicles 21:8, Job 33:26, 2 Corinthians 7:10. So, "Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned Yahuwah, the child who is born to you shall die." So this is talking about David's firstborn son, not Solomon, but his firstborn is going to be taken from him as punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's also a cross reference here, Nehemiah 5:9. Okay. No. Let's see here. Became sick. Okay. So it seems like that was her punishment. Yahuwah caused illness on Bathsheba. So I just want to check all this stuff before we go to chapter 13 here. He would not eat food.
Where did you see that where it says that she had an illness?
I think it was verse 16, maybe. Oh no, 15. Oh, my bad. He became sick. My bad.
I was thinking, what illness did she have?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, it was enough just losing her firstborn.
Yeah. What's weird is that different versions say different things. One says despaired. He was despaired, or I guess in mourning, which makes a lot more sense than, because becoming ill would mean he would be sick. So unless he was mourning so much that he actually became sick, I could see that happening. Seventh day, the child died. The service. Yeah. So this is a story about David basically fasting to try to prevent his son to from being taken from him. And once he realizes that doesn't work, he kind of washes his face, anoints his head, eats again. So Solomon's birth. Now this is where Solomon's birth happens. Now you said his name was called something different, huh?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at 3 different versions. It all says Solomon.
Okay. You don't have in verse 25 of chapter 12.
Oh, 25. Okay.
Mhm.
Because first it says, he called his name Solomon and Yahuwah loved him. Then verse 25 says, so he called his name Yedidiah because of Yahuwah. Okay, so Yahuwah's not the one calling him that. It's David calling him that.
Oh, all right.
Because it says he sent a message by Nathan the prophet, so he called his name Yedidiah because of Yahuwah. So for Yahuwah's sake, or because of Yahuwah.
Yeah, he sent the word through Nathan, through
Yeah,
the
but
prophet.
David's the one naming him.
Okay.
Is
all
what
right.
I'm trying to say. Like, yes, it's through Nathan's message, but Yahuwah's not saying his name shall be Yedidiah.
Oh, okay.
You
All
see
right.
what I'm
All
saying?
right, yeah.
David's the one doing it. He chose to do it. So, and that happens a lot. You'll see in Rachel did the same thing when she's in childbirth, because Yahuwah did something, she would name a child something. Remember how the 12 tribes were born?
Yes.
Like Leah and Rachel, they would give them certain names
Mm-hmm.
for meanings
Yep.
and all that.
Yep.
Yeah. So now Joab fought against Rabbah. So it talks about Joab. Joab sent messengers to David. Okay. So we have that. We're kind of just skimming through here because my mom read this before. So called by name. So David gathered all the people together, went to Rabbah, fought against and took it. That also happens again. I guess it's reiterated in chapter 17, verse 27, and Hebrews 11:34. Huh. Never realized that. Okay, it's interesting. So, no. Very great amount. So he took the crown of the king's head. He brought out the people who were in it and set them to labor with saws and iron picks, iron axes, made them toil at the brick kilns. And thus he did to all the cities of the Ammonites. Then Daud and all the people returned to Jerusalem. Now, when I was away, I heard you talk about Og. Were you trying to say Og was king of the Ammonites?
I didn't say anything about Og. I did
Okay.
say though that he got the crown.
Oh,
He got the crown from the
Okay.
king of the Ammonites, but I don't think
okay.
in my Bible that it says from the head of their king. Yeah, it didn't say. Actually, my footnote says Milcom.
Yeah.
That is Molech.
Well, yeah, that's what the word Malak.
Oh, okay. All right.
The Hebrew word king can be the same word for the Moabite god, Milcom or Molech. Milcom comes from the Hebrew word malak. So where people get confused and think it's wrong to say malak is like because supposedly it's the same Hebrew word. But the thing is, what they did, a lot of these cultures would do, Mom, they would steal from the Hebrew language and they would use names or titles from the Hebrew and use it as a name of their god. I'll give you an example. Like they took al for Elohim. They took the prefix al, used it for Baal. The Phoenicians did, if I'm not mistaken. They called him El, which is just a prefix for Elohim. So they would steal from the Hebrews certain terms and names and stuff like that and make gods out of them. I'll give you an example. Seth, right? He's the son of Adam. In the Egyptian religion, you have Set. Set comes from Seth. It's the same word. Same. If you look in the Hebrew and the Egyptian, it's the same exact word. So what they did was they would steal from the Hebraic culture stuff and name gods after them. So you'll see that a lot. So that's why it gets really convoluted when you have people spreading false information like Yah is the name of a moon goddess and this and that, and they get people to think it's bad to say Yah or Yahuwah, not realizing that other cultures steal from the Hebrews, and they could easily steal the prefix of Yahuwah's name to give to their own god. So there's a lot of misinformation about that historically, and about how you get these names of all these gods and stuff like that. But yeah, so Milcom, yeah, supposedly Milcom is the same word as Malak, supposedly. In Hebrew, it's like the same Strong's number and everything. So some people get convicted not to say Malak anymore for messenger and all that, because of that. But anyway, so all right, chapter 13. Let's see here. Sister Marissa, would you like to read chapter 13 for us?
Sure. Is that 2 Samuel?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, hold on. Okay, 2 Samuel. I gotta find it here. Where are you?
Oh, this is the Tamar chapter.
Yep.
I'm gonna read out of the hold on.
No problem. Take your time.
Okay. I'm going to read out of the Revised Geneva Translation. It says, oh, wait a minute. No. What happened? I'm just going to read out of the King James.
Okay.
Okay, so Ammon and Tamar. Oh, I just hate this chapter. No. Okay. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Now, was Amnon half brother?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick, for she was a virgin, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. Now Jonadab was a very crafty man, and he said to him, "Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." So Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" Then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." And David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour and kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and placed them out before him, but he refused to eat. Then Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." And they all went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them to Amnon her brother in the bedroom. Now when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." But she answered him, "No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. And where could I take my shame? And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Arise, be gone." So she said to him, "No, indeed, this evil of sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. Then he called his servants who attended him and said, "Here, put this woman out, away from me, and bolt the door behind her." Now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head and went away crying bitterly. And Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon, my brother, been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart." So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when the king David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. Absalom murders Amnon. And it came to pass after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Then Absalom came to the king and said, "Kindly note your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." But the king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be a burden to you. Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." And the king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom urged him. So he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, watch now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled. And it came to pass, while they were on the way, that news came to David, saying, Absalom has killed all the king's sons, and none of them is left. So the king arose and tore his garment and lay on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. Then Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, answered and said, let not my lord suppose they have killed all the young men, the king's son, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Now therefore, let not my lord be king take the things to his heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for only Amnon is dead. Absalom flees to Geshur. Then Absalom fled, and the young man who was keeping watch lifted his eyes and looked, and there many people were coming from the road on the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said to the king, look, the king's sons are coming, as your servant said. So it is. So it was, as soon as he had finished speaking, that the king's sons indeed came, and they lifted up their voice and wept. Also the king and all his servants wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon, because he was dead. You know, this chapter really upsets me about David and the fact that, I mean, granted, what Absalom did was just sort of what Levi and Simeon did with his sister. And I find it interesting that it says that the virgins of the king all wore colorful robes.
Yeah, yeah.
The one that Abraham gave Joseph. So there's a lot of symbolism in this. But, you know, David did a lot of things in the end of his reign that really upset me, like the son of Jonathan that was crippled, and the fact that there was word that came to David that said that he was trying to take over his reign, which is a lie. And David believed this person that said this to him about Jonathan's son, even though he promised Jonathan that he was going to take care of his seed. Yeah. And yet still he believed the lie. Because why? Because he didn't, first of all, he didn't go to Abba to ask him if that was true or not. He just believed the word of this man. And what he did to this boy was so terrible. But the fact that he mourned for what his son did to his daughter, it just shows you the depravity of what happened with David in the last days of his reign as king. That he just, I don't know, he just became a different person. I don't know. It's like I don't know if it was curses or it was just something that was, you know, like what Brother Doug read regarding the sword will never leave his home and all this stuff. Sure. And that's what happened. He just had all these terrible things happening to him and his children, and he just deteriorated before his death. That's just I just see it that way.
Yeah, I think from a man's perspective, I can understand where he was coming from with our flesh. we look at our sons as they're our spitting image.
Mhm.
We look at our sons differently, and sometimes we give our sons a double standard. Especially us men, I'm not a husband or a father, but I do know from my father's perspective, he treated me better
It's true.
than my older sister. And I think there was even trouble there where she didn't want to admit it, but she was jealous of my older sister. Crystal was jealous of
Mhm.
the relationship growing up I had with my dad. And
Mhm.
it was like I could do no wrong in his eyes.
That's true.
Didn't matter what I did. If I did something good or not, it was like, I think you have to look at David's story of the rest of his life, like Marissa was talking about. You have to look at it from a man's perspective. So that's the only way you could understand why he, I guess, mourned over Abnon. That's the only way I could mourn over something like that. Even if it was my son, I probably would at the minimum, have to bring him before court and have to let the court handle him. I could not let that go. Especially if something like rape. I could not let that go unpunished. And Absalom, Yahuwah kind of used him as a mercenary in a weird way, because he was kind of like this. He really was like a act first type of guy. Like, kill, get revenge, ask questions later type of person.
Yeah.
And I think Yahuwah used him as kind of like a constant adversary of David until his dying day. Like, this was part of his punishment, was that someone of his own house was going to constantly be his enemy. And Absalom was, until Absalom died, actually. And
But I don't understand why he hated her after he defiled her. I mean,
I don't
he
know.
just
I guess he thought that she was gonna love him. I guess in a weird way, he thought that she would want to lie with him, and basically his love somehow became hatred. I think the guy he definitely had a demon in him, Abnon, to be doing that.
Absolutely.
There was a demonic spirit at work there. I think possibly because of the open door of committing adultery with Bathsheba, you could possibly have a spirit there at work that could have transferred from David to someone else. And this is again why we were talking before Sister Marissa came on, why I believe in generational curses, because you see that all throughout Scripture. The sins of the father go down to the son. And there's always a similar issue. There seemed to be a sexual demon that constantly followed David's lineage, even with Solomon at some point. I think there had to be a demon at work with Solomon as well, because I understand the text says that he loves all his wives, or that he was in love with all of them, but I think to even contemplate that many wives and concubines together, 1,000 women, you got some type of sexual spirit there. At some point, there has to be something wrong there, because I can't, even in my most perverse mind, I could not think that I need that many sexual partners. So I do think there was a demon there, even with Solomon at a certain point. So that's the only thing I could think of why Amnon hated her at some point, is because he, in his twisted mind, thought she was going to love him. He thought, well, if I seduce her, I'd get her to lie with me. And I don't even think he initially wanted to rape her. I think what happened was he realized she wasn't going to lie with him, and then he resorted to rape.
I think when she rejected him, that's when it probably enraged him, because maybe he thought that she was going to consent. And then when she didn't consent, that's when that demon really manifested.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, because that's what makes sense to me. It doesn't even seem like he pre-planned the rape either. it seems like that was a reaction. That was a reaction to her saying no. Was then he raped her.
No, he
And-
did pre-plan the rape because remember his
Oh,
friend
okay.
told him.
The meal and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He actually planned to rape her because the friend told him what to do, and he went ahead and did it.
That's right.
What's weird is why the friend didn't get punished at all. You don't see him going on trial. This guy basically consulted his supposable friend to rape his own sister. Whether he thought the guy was going to rape her or just going to have sex with her, either way, he was at the minimum was telling him, how to sleep with his own sister.
Yeah, but you see that the fact of the matter is that he saw the king's son's face down, and that's a spoiled child right there. That's how I see him, as just a spoiled child that he wanted to get whatever he wanted to get, and he sees the king's son distraught and upset, and then he just told him, just take her, just lie with her because you're the king's son. I mean, it says that he saw the king's son's face, right?
That's right.
So he just thought, okay, so you're the king's son. You could just take her because you know what? You can have whatever you want. You're the king's son.
Yeah.
And
So-
I think that's just the same thing with, like, rich people today. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same spirit, that because you feel that you're entitled to something because of the power or the prevalence of who you are or the name that you carry, then you can have whatever you want. There's no consequences because, you have the name.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah, and so he would have been what, the son of,
He was the oldest son.
but who
So-
was his mother?
Gosh.
I wonder if he's from Mikhail's marriage or
I
he
want
would
to
have
say Makah. There was a
Makah,
wife named
okay.
Makah.
been.
I think that he might have been her son.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What's weird is that you don't know much about her or even Abnon until this point. So
Yeah.
it's very weird. It's
There's a little bit about Amnon in that he had a little aversion with Absalom because Absalom felt that he should be given the kingship after David. And there was like friction between the two of them.
yeah. Well, Absalom, like, he wanted power.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the type of character that I
Yep.
see as like a power hungry mercenary type of guy, whether for good or for bad. That's
Mhm.
kind of what he was. He even wanted to take the kingship from David.
Yes.
He when he got old enough, and he was starting to war with his dad, he was like, you know what, I should be king.
Yeah.
And so I think he was a little power hungry, Absalom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also now Absalom, was he from Bathsheba?
No,
He wasn't either. So I would imagine if Bathsheba's not his mother, there's friction there too because of that. I wouldn't be surprised if Absalom had friction with David because David cheated on his mother. And there would be some type of friction there too, depending on how old Absalom was, was Absalom even though born when the adultery happened with Bathsheba? Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, Absalom was born. Okay,
Mhm.
so yeah. So if he heard about that, then I could see him fostering hatred for David because of that. Very easily. I just want to look up who Absalom's mother was. I wonder if it's Mikhail, Absalom's mother, because also she hated him as well. She hated David
No,
as well.
she never had a child. She was
Okay.
given that curse.
Oh,
from
Makkah was his mother, huh?
Makkah, yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
Okay.
She didn't never get pregnant ever.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Maacah was the mother of Absalom. Actually, yeah, so I guess we don't know much about this other woman though, Maacah. We don't know much about her. So she's the mother of Absalom and Tamar. So who's the mother of Abnon then?
I don't know. Hold on. Let me,
Yeah, David had about 10 wives, I
Yeah.
think. He had a lot, and really no man needs 10 women. But that's
Now,
what they
he
said.
didn't have as many wives as Solomon, that's for sure.
Oh no,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Solomon
was a
had
mess.
Yes,
1,000.
Solomon definitely had an issue. That's an issue, man. 700 concubines. I don't know why you need that many women. I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine that. That's 1,000 women in general because he
Yeah.
had 100 wives. So
He
you
was
had
a male nymphomaniac.
yeah, he had issues, Solomon. He definitely had issues, and the fact that all of them were pagan was another problem. Almost all his women were pagan. I don't think he had one Israelite wife. Um, his first one was the daughter of Pharaoh that he was in league with. He was, made, I guess you could say, made a covenant with or allegiance with that one Pharaoh that killed the giants at his time. Trying to remember the guy's name, but the Septuagint mentions this Pharaoh around that time that was like finishing off the giants and stuff like that. That his daughter married Solomon, and Solomon had to make a palace for her and all that. He couldn't have her living with him in the king's palace. So there was constant even just with the spiritual side of it, there was constant problems because he was, marrying pagan women. So it seems like why Absalom would have hated him was because Absalom and Maacah complained about Tamar's rape and David did nothing. So that would have been part of the reason Absalom started to hate David.
Yeah, which makes me really wonder, why did David not punish um Ab- Abdon for doing that to his daughter?
I
It doesn't
guess,
make
yeah,
sense.
I don't. Other than what I know about how a father looks at his son, that's the only thing I can think of is that some fathers can't bring themselves to do that, and they yeah,
But she was his child. I mean, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
if a man today found out that his son raped his daughter, he would be
I
very.
think he was a sucker for his sons.
Maacah was the daughter of Absalom.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got this,
don't worry about it right now.
oh, that's all right. I was trying to find out.
But I
Who the
think
mothers
in general, David was a sucker for his sons because he let his love for them cloud his judgment. And for example, when Absalom died, he was mad that he was killed. Joab went and killed Absalom for him, and he was mourning for Absalom, even though Absalom was seeking his life. So David constantly was clouded by emotion. That's right. And this is a perfect example of what we were talking about last night. This is how the devil, uses emotions against you. And sometimes people get spoiled because their parents feel that they actually feel bad about punishing their kids, their children.
Mhm.
And it's, I've seen it time and time again where you feel so bad to have to punish them that they end up getting spoiled. And, I've seen it a lot. But, David always had problems with his sons. He always favored his sons. From what I see, he favored his sons more than his daughters. And he had, and I can understand from a father's perspective, but the problem was that it got to the point where, Amnon was spoiled. You had Absalom who's trying to kill him, and he can't bring himself to have to kill his own son, even though Absalom is seeking his life. And stuff like that. So he definitely had an issue with that. He had an issue with that. He definitely had issues with his sons, and I think a lot of fathers can relate to that. They can relate to that. There's just something about a father-son relationship that it's hard to be able to do what you have to do in those type of situations, and a lot of fathers are not able to do it.
Doesn't look like he had that great of a brother either. But it's easy to see why Yahuwah wanted David as king. Like, Jesse wanted Samuel to look at all of his sons, but Yahuwah did not want any of them. He wanted David because this brother of David's, I mean, he was involved in this whole thing.
Was that David's brother?
Yeah. David's brother was the father of hold on, let me get back to it.
The chapter
2 Samuel. All right, this is the chapter about this. Okay.
So you're saying Jonadab was David's brother?
Now Amnon had a friend named Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, David's brother. So
yeah, he was the son of David's brother.
Right. Amnon
so he's not. It wasn't David's brother.
Oh, all right, I misread it.
Yeah, the son of David's brother advised Amnon to do that.
Okay.
So basically, David's nephew
Mm-hmm.
told Amnon to do that. So yeah, David's brother would have not advised him to do that. No, David's family was not the problem. The problem was the children that were being begotten to the next generation.
Yeah.
That was the problem. Not David's father's house. His father's, Jesse's house, did not have really that level of wickedness in there. All of David's brothers were righteous. The problem with his brothers, though, I think they were a little puffed up. Number one, when you look at the story of why David was anointed versus them, they were more or less, they expected to be anointed. They expected.
Right. They weren't humble
they were more or less, looking at it like, you're going to choose him. He's a little shepherd boy. What are you doing? Type of thing, So, but anyway, yeah, there was definitely a curse in David's household after this, because then you see Solomon ended up doing what he did. After Solomon, it gets worse. Solomon's sons, that curse seems to go down to Solomon's lineage, where none of his sons were really that righteous.
Wasn't David the youngest brother?
Yes,
youngest. Yep. Yeah, and I think that's another foreshadowing to the Messiah too, because we see in Micah 5, it talks about, Ephrathah being the least of the clans of Judah.
Yeah.
And so the idea that he would be the smallest or the least in reputation to his brothers was like another foreshadowing to Yahusha. So yeah.
The runt of the litter.
Yeah.
David,
I think shepherds too. Yeah. Shepherds are also, obviously, they point to Yahuwah. And why Yahuwah likes shepherds is because he shepherds his own people. So you see that a lot too. Yahuwah always chooses a shepherd.
Yeah.
Whether it's Jacob, Joseph, Uh, you know, Abraham, I think, was more of a religious type of shepherd. I don't think Abraham ever, like,
Yeah.
ever shepherded actual sheep, but in a religious, spiritual way, he was a shepherd. He was a leader. Same thing with Moses. Moses was a shepherd of Yahuwah's people.
Mm.
So Yahuwah likes choosing shepherds,
Mm-hmm.
either that or carpenters,
Yeah.
either one. So, he chose Joseph to be the stepdad of Yahusha, who was a carpenter, and all that. So, yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. So, yeah, chapter 13, though, is pretty much self-explanatory. It is definitely one of those harder chapters and definitely shows that David, as righteous as he was at the height of him being king, he had flaws. All the patriarchs had flaws, by the way. All of them had flaws. Noah got drunk once. Enoch is really the only one that kind of gets put on a pedestal that he's perfect, but walking with Yahuwah doesn't mean you're sinless. So I think we get the wrong idea with that.
It means you're blameless.
Yeah, it means that in Yahuwah's sight, in his eyes, you're made blameless. Meaning that,
You're repentant.
yeah,
That's-
you're repentant, you're trying to please him. So in his sight, you're blameless. It's kind of like the same thing where you have the Boaz story with Ruth. Ruth obviously wasn't perfect, but in his sight, she was like a diamond. So that's kind of how Yahuwah sees us. It's the eye of the beholder, type of thing. So
It's
anyway,
because choose to obey him, and the rest of the world doesn't care.
yeah, the rest of the world is they're relishing in sin to the point where they actually love their own sin. And versus people that Yahuwah have chosen, that he's chosen to actually have a desire to obey him and actually have a desire to want to be with him for eternity. But yeah. So let's see here. I think we're at chapter 14. Man, I gotta go for another intermission. Mom, can you read 14 for me?
Sure, absolutely.
Jeez, my bladder today. Jeez.
Okay. Absalom returns to Jerusalem. Joab, son of Saruai, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, "Pretend you are in mourning, dress in mourning clothes, and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him." And Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor. And she said, "Help me, O king." The king asked her, "What is troubling you?" She said, "I am indeed a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight with each other in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant, they say. Hand over the one who struck his brother down, so that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. Then we will get rid of the heir as well." They would put out the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth. The king said to the woman, "Go home, and I will issue an order in your behalf." And the woman from Tekoa said to him, "My master the king, let the blame rest on me and on my father's family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt." The king replied, "If anyone says anything to you, Bring him to me, and he will not bother you again. She said, then let the king invoke Yahuwah, his Elohim, to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed. As surely as Yahuwah lives, he said, no, not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground. Then the woman said, let your servant speak a word to my master the king. Speak, he replied. The woman said, why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of Yahuwah? When the king says this, does he not convict himself? For the king has not brought back his banished son? Like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But Yahuwah does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways so that a banished person may not remain estranged from him. And now I have come to say this to my master the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will do what his servant asks. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver his servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from the inheritance Yahuwah gave us. And now your servant says, may the word of my master the king bring me rest. For my master the king is like an angel of Yahuwah in discerning good and evil. May Yahuwah, your Elohim, be with you. Then the king said to the woman, do not keep from me the answer to what I am going to ask you. Let my master the king speak, the woman said. Then the king asked, isn't the hand of Joab with you in all this? The woman answered, as surely as you live, my sovereign the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything my sovereign the king says. Yes, it was your servant Joab who instructed me to do this, and who put all these words into the mouth of your servant. Your servant Joab did this to change the present situation. My master has wisdom like that of an angel of Yahuwah. He knows everything that happens in the land. The king said to Joab, very well, I will do it. Go bring back the young man Absalom. Joab fell with his face to the ground to pay him honor, and he blessed the king. Joab said, today your servant knows that he has found favor in your eyes, my master the king, because the king has granted his servant's request. Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, he must go to his own house. He must not see my face. So Absalom went to his own house and did not see the face of the king. In all Yashrael, there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. Whenever he cut the hair of his head, he used to cut his hair from time to time when it became too heavy for him. He would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. 3 sons and a daughter were born to Absalom. The daughter's name was Tamar, and she became a beautiful woman. Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab in order to send him to the king, but Joab refused to come to him. So he sent a second time, but he refused to come. Then he said to his servants, look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Joab did to Absalom's house, and he said to him, Why have your servants set my field on fire? Absalom said to Joab, look, I sent word to you and said, come here so I can send you to the king to ask, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I were still there. Now then, I want to see the king's face, and if I am guilty of anything, let him put me to death. So Joab went to the king and told him this. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Interesting stuff.
You okay there?
Yeah, I'm just sort of moving things along.
Let me see. I'm looking for a verse here from Isaiah.
It kind of adds to your point. Now we know he's handsome and that there was nobody more handsome than him. So this would be even more reason for David, to favor him, like what you were talking about before.
Yeah. This is what I was looking for when it said, the king is like an angel of Yahuwah, knowing good from evil. It reminded me that Yahusha in Isaiah 7,
Oh, yeah.
it says before he would know to choose good over evil, he would choose good. This is like I believe this is a parallel to Yahusha.
Yeah.
Isaiah 7:16.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can find this Septuagint.
I'm just putting your stuff together here. It's all.
OCD. OCD. Oh, man. Woo. All right. Word, behold, the child shall know good or evil. He refuses evil. So before he would naturally, humanly understand sin from righteousness, he would know to reject the evil and choose the good. So it says, before the child shall know to refuse evil, he refuses evil to choose the good, and the land shall be forsaken, which you are afraid of because of the two kings. So this is a prophecy from Isaiah 7 about the coming Messiah. What's interesting is that this guy is saying to David that you're like the angel of Yahuwah that knows to choose good from evil. So this is kind of interesting to me. What I noticed too was the Septuagint is the only version of this verse that has he refuses evil. You'll see in the Masoretic, it says, before the boy knows to reject the bad and choose what is good, the land of the two kings you dread will be abandoned. So that phrase is completely omitted out. The phrase of that he will refuse evil. It's completely omitted out. Because my assumption is these rabbis knew who it was referring to, that before he could be taught what sin is, he would know not to sin. They would not want that in there because that shows that this baby is not a normal baby. It's someone that pre-existing that knows righteousness from sin. So if you think about it from the Masoretes' perspective, obviously they would want to take that out. They would want to take that phrase out. Because then it shows that this child, this Messiah being born, has a celestial origin. The person that's in the baby is a pre-existent being that is taking on the flesh of this child and would know to choose righteousness, obviously, because he is the lawgiver. Yahushua is the lawgiver. So obviously he would not need anyone to teach him righteousness. So they don't want that in there because that proves what we believe about the doctrine of basically that Yahushua is the creator incarnated in flesh. So they want to take out any any part of any messianic prophecy that would prove that. So most of your Bibles will just say, before the boy knows to reject what is bad and choose what is good, the land of the two kings will dread and be abandoned. So that phrase is completely taken out to he will refuse the evil. So that's an interesting difference there. So anyway, just thought I would mention that. So, and that was Isaiah 7:16 in the Septuagint. Let me see if I can edit that real quick, because I wanted the quote to be before the actual verse. Anyway, so let me just see. Why is it not allowing me? I don't know why it doesn't allow me to do that. Okay. It's acting up for a bit. Sometimes the cursor on my computer acts up. But anyway, any which way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this study today. Hopefully
Yeah,
you got some
good.
edification out of it. The only reason I'm not expounding on chapter 14, it seems like it was pretty much self-explanatory. There's nothing really to get into with that chapter. Like we usually say here, if any brothers and sisters out there looking for fellowship, feel free to reach out. Oh, also, Yahuwah willing, I want to do a study soon about the 13th month, and kind of like a calendar type of study. So Yahuwah willing, we'll be recording that soon, explaining why we start the new year when we start it, and all of that. So please stay tuned with that. Other than that, Shabbat Shalom, all of our brothers and sisters that tuned in and stayed with us the whole time. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great rest of the Shabbat. And Yahuwah willing, see you next time.